Many people who are curious about Unitarian Universalism frequently come up to the minister, who is often me, and ask, "Do you celebrate Christmas?" And I always answer that we do. Most seem pleased to hear that answer. It's like they're clicking off a couple of things that they need to satisfy themselves about. The next question they want to ask, and I can see it trembling on their lips, but most often it goes unsaid. And that question is, but why? If, as they were taught, Christmas celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ, who is considered by many to be the Son of God and Savior of us all, how could we celebrate Christmas? What do we believe about Jesus? What we do believe about him is that he seemed to have a profound sense of what we require to lead lives of integrity and compassion. He embodied in his faith, in the way he lived, and he died tragically, though setting an example by his life that would be nearly impossible for us to match. Though we'd be a lot happier if we came a bit closer to his love of life and his love of his fellow human beings. We believe that when Jesus died, his disciples felt even closer to him. And when they were gathered together, they sensed in a way that was almost impossible to describe that he was there among them. But this was such a profound, almost ineffable feeling. There was no way for them to express it except to tell of having seen him, actually seeing him after his death. We also believe that the celebration of Christmas is as much or more about us and our relationships with one another. It is more about our hopefulness and determination to lead better lives than it is about the details of Jesus' birth. So we celebrate and sing and sometimes even live out parts of the Christmas story because it is a story of travelers, a story of seeking and establishing a home even where sometimes there is no welcome. It is about getting out of the cold. It is about a tale that, as far as anyone knows, is unique in the history of humankind. Many Unitarian Universalist congregations celebrate Christmas quite vigorously and quite traditionally. It's witnessed this lovely setting behind me, which was not there when I served here for 2 years. Beautiful, I really love it. When our present hymnal was published in 1993, some of the words to the carols had been rewritten to accommodate modern sensibilities. Many of us used the new hymnals that year, and the response among many UU congregations was overwhelming. They hated it. They said, "We want the traditional carols." Even though our religious understandings may have changed, these carols link us to our own pasts and to generations before us who dared to believe that warmth and love could survive, even grow in the world. So let's look at the story and try to understand why it is so special and what it is telling us. The stories in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke are not history, of course. They are metaphorical. They represent, as clergyman and Christmas carol lyricist Philip Brooks once put it so well, they represent the hopes and fears of all our years. The stories are about us. They are about the lonely voyage that each life is. And we recognize this so well that we have put ourselves into these stories. And we call it Christmas. Let's take a long look at the story as that is reflected in the gospel texts, and then see how we fit ourselves into it. Let's first approach the stable in Bethlehem, the one that has been depicted in paintings and poems and songs, and therefore etched into the back of our minds. Snowdrifts and pine trees surround our stable. Our own hymn, which is titled "In the Bleak Midwinter," depicts Joseph and Mary trudging through the bleak, frozen, midwinter landscape to find warmth and comfort in a snow-covered barn where they are sheltered from the wind by the trees of northern New England. I don't think it's just New Englanders who, from the richness of their imaginations, picture that stable as located somewhere very near Woodstock, Vermont. And we know that Jesus was born in sunny Bethlehem, but most people prefer to cite the story in the midst of the bleakness, the coldness, and the winter that actually surrounds their own lives. They supplement the bare framework of the story with an image of warmth coming to a shivering people, the warmth of a stable filled with love. The storytellers recognize that we all are a shivering people. The bleakness outside the stable represents our inner weather, not Bethlehem's weather. We're hoping to come in out of the cold. Do you ever wonder why the stables that are placed on church lawns at Christmas time are almost life-sized? Many people want to imagine themselves in the stable, to live again the promise of a new life, a second chance, and the promise we make together to nurture that life. Did you ever wonder as well what the big deal is in having a white Christmas, aside from that Bing Crosby song? Could it be that the pristine whiteness of a newly fallen snow seems to promise a new start for all of us, just as the birth of a child seems to suggest that new births could happen throughout the rest of our lives. A new start is partly what Christmas means for many people. According to the biblical story, Jesus was placed in a manger. A manger is literally a feeding trough for animals. The story does not say that he was born in a manger, only that he was placed there. The story does not say that he was born in a barn or in a stable. The manger could very well have been located in a cave. In mind's eyes, however, we do not want to see the world and the cold, damp walls of a cave. We want to see in our manger, or in our birthing place. We want to see a stable that was built by human hands and hewn with an adze or cut with a saw from rough wood. We want to see it reflected in the light of torches. We want to give this child some greater warmth than the actual child may have ever enjoyed. We want to surround the manger with friendly animals. Now, there are probably hundreds of carols and short stories that have been written about animals in the stable. However, the text does not say anything about animals being there. Perhaps this is because the people for whom the story was first written were not as sentimental as we are about animals. In fact, as far as they were concerned, the animals in a stable were just waiting to be food for the table. Our wanting to fill the stable with animals reflects our wish to see our own domestic pets as also creatures of God. The story tells us that there's no place for Joseph and Mary in the inn. And so in every pageant, there is a child playing the innkeeper and saying, "No room." The innkeeper is pled with by several people, and finally he relents and he brusquely offers Mary and Joseph a corner of his stable because he believes a stable is the proper place for such lower class trash as they seem to him to be. The innkeeper is a great sermonic device, but there is no actual innkeeper in the text. We created the innkeeper because we too often are the innkeepers in our own lives. We push new people and new experiences away. We fold our arms across our chests and we say, "No room to anything new, to anyone new." And we need this story, and we tell it to remind ourselves who the innkeeper really is. As we remember it, and as we want to depict it on church greens and town commons, 3 kings from the east arrive in time to find the shepherds kneeling before the manger, awestruck at the birth of this child. Actually, this is a merger of 2 stories. Matthew tells us about the 3 kings who made the long journey following a star to Bethlehem, where they found it shone over the house where Mary and Joseph lived. So they dropped into Joseph's house to see the baby. They wanted to have some eggnog, leave some baby shower presents. All the things you usually do when friends of yours have a new baby. There was no inn, no crowds, no shepherds, and no manger in Matthew's story. Luke tells us all about the manger and the shepherds, but there are no magi in Luke's story. It seems clear that Matthew did not want shepherds in his story, and Luke did not want kings in his. We have brought the stories together. We want both Joseph and Mary's journey and the Magi's journey represented in one story that we love. Why do we want both of these journeys in a story we tell in our heads? For one thing, making a journey through the cold and darkness to a place of warmth and love is something that many people traditionally do at this time of the year. In fact, at Christmas Eve, services here in Newport, you will play host to a large number of travelers who will reach the end of their journeys here at your inn. More importantly, though, we understand that life is a journey. Sometimes it is a dark and uncertain journey. We travel in search of a goal that is alternately mysterious, elusive, and sometimes even frightening. Along our journey, there have been places filled with busy people going about their journeys and about their business who have no particular concern for us. There have been inns where we would have liked to stop and rest, but there was no room there for us. Our future travels contain the same possibilities and the same risks. We travel with hope and we bring gifts. We hope to be at ease with the shepherds and kings we may meet in life, and we hope that whatever our future resting places may be found, we will not be afraid when we get there. In other words, we craft the elements of the Christmas story to speak to our own situations, our own longings for assurances that our journeys will be fruitful and that our lives will be illuminated by a faith we have found along the way. The very existence of this story, in all of its warmth, suggests that our faith is justified. Let's just hear that story one more time, remembering it is our story as well. It begins with a song of Mary, in which she expresses her pleasure that God should give the gift of creating life to a peasant woman. It is a rare moment because in Mary's world, most people believe that God does not traffic with the poor and rarely with women. So already God is doing something to break up the old rules of might and power make right. And then bureaucracy intervenes. The entire Roman world shall go to the places of their birth to be registered. This was the government's way of saying, we want to keep tabs on you just in case we haven't made your lives miserable enough. So Mary and Joseph travel at the height of her pregnancy. Upon reaching their destination, they find that there are more important people taking up the room in which they might have hoped to birth their child. So they are given a crude alternative hiding place. And this is fitting because as far as the town of Bethlehem is concerned, Jesus will be just another poor Galilean rat. This is a cynical world, not unlike our own, in which no one expects that anything really hopeful will happen. In the fields outside of town, there are shepherds who have no status at all because they take care of other creatures. And it is to these people that the angel appears and speaks the words that characterize the soul of the Judaic and Christian traditions. Be not afraid. Apparently, the angel believes that these peasants who actually care for each other and who care for other creatures are the only ones who can actually receive and understand the message. Be not afraid. You're not left alone. Matthew tells us that Herod trembles when he hears that something about this newly born child is more important than he is. And so the three kings are told in a dream that if they find the child, they have to keep it to themselves. Matthew, who sees this story through the eyes of kings, knows that a power which does not belong to the king must be talked about very discreetly, or the king will get angry. On the other hand, Luke receives this story through the eyes of shepherds, people who have no orientation to power, people who have no interest in power, instructs his shepherds to go out and tell the whole world. Luke believes that ultimately the holy is stronger and more powerful than the apprehensions of dictators. We don't know precisely where Matthew and Luke got their stories. They really aren't replicated anywhere else in the Hebrew tradition. But it is not difficult to see the inspirational source for what they wrote. That source is the central moral and spiritual message of the Jewish and Christian worlds, and it is also what we inherit from that tradition. Here is that message. Life is a precious gift. Along with this gift, there comes a mysterious strength. It is the strength of the holy that dwells among us. And if we are open to it, it is a strength that enables us to use the gift of life well. Thanksgiving, care, compassion, and justice are its goals. Cynicism, manipulation, greed, and corruption will never be the last words. In fact, the next source of hopefulness and inspiration may very well be near to us. It may even come to us in the form of a person or an influence that will surprise us and challenge us even as it comforts us. Can we make that journey to Bethlehem again this year, trusting in life's capacity to provide us with all that we really need? Can we find the openness expressed in the Magi's presentation to the child? Can we find the faith expressed in the words from Luke's story? Be not afraid. In the days to come, may you find the inn that you seek, the company that you cherish, the angels that you need to hear, and the message that love is waiting for you somewhere. Do not be afraid. Amen.